I stood by the wide glass doors of the graduation hall, wiping my palms on the sides of my trousers for the 5th time. Outside, the sun was setting low, painting everything in a soft, golden haze. Inside, families filled the rows, bustling with chatter, laughter, cameras flashing every few seconds. Somewhere in that colorful crowd, I hoped to see them, Carla and Brianna. I checked my phone again. No new messages. Just the same sent text sitting there, unanswered. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment, tempted to call. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe the flight got delayed. I had paid for everything, flights, hotels, even bought them new outfits. Made sure they had no excuse not to be here. After all, this was big. Not just a ceremony. Not just another certificate. This was the beginning of everything I had worked for. Everything I had sacrificed for. I adjusted the cap on my head, feeling the grease stains that no amount of scrubbing could fully erase from my hands, my skin. They were part of me. Like the years I spent under cars, behind counters, in dead-end jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. All of it had led to this moment. Beside me, Miles clapped a firm hand on my shoulder. Nervous. He grinned, his breath smelling faintly of the coffee he practically lived on. His wife Tara waved excitedly from where she had found us 2 empty seats in the 3rd row. Not nervous, I lied, forcing a small laugh. Just hoping everyone gets here in time. Miles nodded. He was the kind of friend who didn't need every word explained. We grew up together, tossed footballs in the same dusty fields, shared cheap beers in the same smoky bars. When I told him about going back to school for a mechanic certification at my age, he didn't laugh. He didn't call it a waste. He said, "About damn time, man." "Come on," he said now, nudging me toward the seats. "They'll show. It's a big day." I followed him reluctantly, scanning the doorways one more time. The pit in my stomach tightened. No Carla in her blue dress. No Brianna with the gold ribbons I'd seen her pack. Just strangers streaming in, laughing, adjusting corsages and mortarboards. The ceremony started. The national anthem filled the hall, and we all stood, hats off, hands over hearts. My throat burned. Not from pride, but from something sour I couldn't swallow. Row by row, names were called. Cheers, whistles, and claps erupted with every announcement. Parents leapt up, phones raised high, desperate to catch every second. I stood still, heart hammering. "Logan Barnes," the speaker finally called. Miles hooped loudly beside me, and Tara clapped so hard her bracelet flew off her wrist. I managed a smile, walking up to the stage. Shaking hands. Taking the diploma. Cameras flashed from the official booth, but not from the spot where I had reserved extra seats. Those seats remained heartbreakingly empty. I held my diploma in both hands as I returned to my seat. The thick paper seemed heavier than it should have been. Heavy with everything it cost me to get here. After the ceremony, groups spilled into the lobby, hugging, laughing, taking pictures. I stood awkwardly near the doors again, phone in hand, willing it to buzz. It finally did. I unlocked the screen, hope flaring too quickly. "Carla, it's not that serious. Just a mechanic workshop graduation." Another buzz. "Brianna, we couldn't miss Mom's sister's movie night. Hope it was good though, lol." The screen blurred for a second, and I realized my hand was shaking. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly through my nose. I didn't reply. There was no point. "You okay?" Miles asked gently, coming over with 2 sodas in his hands. I looked at him. At Tara laughing with a group of my classmates like they were her own cousins. At the strangers around us, snapping family photos. I nodded once. "Yeah," I said hoarsely. "Yeah, let's get out of here." We walked out into the cooling evening. The parking lot buzzed with the hum of car engines and distant laughter. The night smelled like fresh tar and grass. Normal. Indifferent. Miles popped open the soda can and held it out like a toast. "To new beginnings," he said. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my can against his. The cold metal stung my fingers. In the car, driving back to the cheap motel I had booked for myself, I stared out the window, barely hearing Tara's cheerful chatter about the ceremony. My heart felt hollow. I thought about the hours I worked double shifts. The times I missed Brianna's school plays because I couldn't get time off. The nights Carla cried about money, and I swallowed my own exhaustion and picked up another side gig. I thought about how proud I was when I enrolled in the program. How Carla barely looked up from her phone. "Oh cool," she said once. "Hope you pass." Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. The motel sign blinked against the darkness when we pulled in. Tara hugged me tightly. "We're proud of you, Logan," she said. Seriously proud. I nodded, too choked up to speak. Later that night, sitting alone on the scratchy bedspread, I opened my laptop. Not to scroll through social media, not to check the news. I opened a blank document. I stared at the empty screen for a long moment, then started typing. Not a letter, not a message to Carla or Brianna. Just writing. I didn't know what I was writing yet. I just knew that something inside me had shifted. Something tired of begging to be seen. Something tired of handing over pieces of myself to people who couldn't even show up. The clack of keys filled the small, musty room. Outside, a train whistle sounded in the distance. I kept typing. The national anthem filled the hall, bouncing off the tall ceilings and pressing into every corner of the room. I stood there stiffly, cap over my heart, staring straight ahead. Everyone else seemed so relaxed, some parents even whispering jokes to their kids or sneaking pictures when they thought no one was looking. But for me, the sound of the anthem felt like it was shaking something loose inside my chest. It wasn't nerves anymore. It was something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. The final note of the song faded away, and the principal stepped up to the microphone, voice loud and full of excitement. Today, we celebrate not just your achievements, but the future you are about to build, he boomed. Cheers broke out across the auditorium. Families whistled, clapped, hollered out names. I clapped too, trying to stay part of it, but every second that ticked by felt heavier. I kept glancing toward the back, toward the entrance doors. Maybe they'd come running in late, faces flushed, apologizing for missing the start. Maybe Carla would be waving, yelling my name. Maybe Brianna would be laughing and rolling her eyes at how dramatic her mother was being. But the doors stayed closed. No familiar faces appeared. No apologies. No smiles meant for me. When the line started moving and my classmates began walking across the stage one by one, my hands tightened into fists at my sides. I tried not to let my mind go there. Tried not to think about all the times I showed up for them. Every soccer game, every last-minute birthday gift, every stupid movie night they wanted me to host even after a 12-hour shift. And now? My one moment? My one damn moment, and they couldn't even be bothered. Logan Barnes, the announcer called, and the hall filled with claps and polite cheers. I walked up the steps, the floor feeling strangely soft under my feet. My smile for the photographer was tight, almost mechanical. I took the diploma from the principal's hands, strong handshake, firm grip, and made my way back down, diploma clutched like it was my only anchor in the room. Miles caught my eye and whistled so loud it made a few people jump. Tara stood and cheered without a shred of embarrassment. I gave them a small wave, my throat burning. As the ceremony ended, the crowd flooded the lobby. Families embraced their graduates, balloons bobbed against the ceiling, cameras flashed nonstop. I pulled my phone out again. Still no call. No missed messages. Swallowing hard, I slipped outside for some air. The cool breeze hit my face, clearing my head just enough to stop me from doing something stupid like calling Carla again. I scrolled through my text instead, just to give my hands something to do. And that's when the first message came in. Carla, it's not that serious. Just a mechanic workshop graduation. The words blinked back at me, cold and casual like she was canceling dinner plans, not missing one of the biggest days of my life. A second later, Brianna's message popped up. Brianna, we couldn't miss Mom's sister's movie night. Hope it was good though, lol. I stared at the screen, numb. Movie night. That's what they chose over this. I didn't know what hurt worse, the fact that they didn't come, or the fact that they didn't even seem sorry about it. For a second, the world blurred around me. The laughter from inside the hall sounded far away. The proud families, the clatter of chairs being stacked, the rustle of programs being tucked away into purses, it all became a muffled noise, like I was underwater. Miles found me outside, holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. Hey man, he said carefully, reading my face. Everything cool? I shoved my phone into my pocket and forced a smile that I'm sure didn't fool him. Yeah, just tired, that's all. He handed me a cup, and we clinked them together half-heartedly. Inside, Tara was already chatting with some of my classmates, talking about how proud she was of her boy. I almost laughed at that. Miles and Tara had no blood relation to me, but in that moment, they were more family than the people who shared my last name. We didn't stay long. No one suggested pictures. No one asked for speeches. I was grateful for that. I didn't want to remember this night with posed smiles and fake memories. Instead, we drove to a small food truck park a few miles from the school. The sky had darkened into a deep blue, and fairy lights strung overhead blinked on, casting a soft, warm glow over the tables. The smell of grilled meat and fried onions filled the air. It was nothing fancy. It wasn't what I had imagined when I thought about how tonight would feel. But it was real. Miles bought burgers and fries. Tara found a bottle of cheap champagne from one of the vendors, and we sat on a plastic picnic bench under the lights. To Logan, Tara said, raising her plastic cup high. Top of the class, even if the rest of the world doesn't know how big that is. Miles bumped his cup against hers and then against mine. To better days ahead. I sipped the champagne. It tasted like soap and aluminum, but I swallowed it anyway. They didn't know it, but they were holding me together tonight. Across the table, Tara pulled out her phone and took a blurry selfie of the three of us, all half laughing, half eating greasy burgers. She posted it to her small social media account with a caption, "Proud of our guy Logan." Curious, I pulled out my own phone and clicked over to Carla's profile. There she was, tagged at her sister Mona's backyard, fairy lights strung up behind them, glasses of wine in hand, big wide smiles. The caption read, "Movie night magic with the best people. Not a single mention of me. Not a single hint that today had been anything more important than an excuse for cocktails and gossip." I locked the phone and shoved it deep into my pocket, like burying it would make the ache in my chest go away. "More fries?" Miles asked, oblivious to my mood. "Yeah," I said quietly, taking a handful and stuffing them into my mouth just to keep myself from saying something bitter. We stayed there until the food trucks started closing down and the owners began sweeping the sidewalks. I thanked Miles and Tara a dozen times as they dropped me back at my motel. Inside, the room smelled faintly of old carpet and something chemical. I turned on the small lamp by the bed and sat down heavily. I should have cried. I should have screamed or thrown something. But instead, I sat there, staring at the wall, feeling empty. Then I remembered the laptop sitting in my backpack. Without thinking too hard, I pulled it out, set it on my knees, and opened a blank document. And I started writing. Not a message to Carla. Not a letter to Brianna. Not a confession. Just a story. About a man who gave everything for people who never saw him. About a man who learned, a little too late, that sometimes, when the applause doesn't come from the people you love, maybe it's time to find new people to clap with. The words poured out, not pretty or polished, but raw and real. And as the night deepened, for the first time all day, I didn't feel quite so alone. The motel room was cold that night. Even though I had cranked the heater up, the place still felt damp, like the walls themselves refused to warm up. I sat there for a long time, the soft hum of the heater filling the empty space, my laptop screen glowing on my lap. The words I had typed earlier sat there, unfinished. A story without an ending. I closed the laptop gently and set it aside on the nightstand. I wasn't ready to finish that story yet. Maybe I needed more time. Or maybe, deep down, I knew it wasn't really about writing some perfect story. It was about surviving the disappointment without letting it hollow me out completely. A knock at the door made me jump. I stood up, heart pounding, but when I looked through the peephole, it was only Miles, grinning and holding something behind his back. I opened the door, and he pushed past me like he owned the place. Tara followed, balancing a paper bag and a cheap bottle of champagne. "Surprise, graduate," Tara said, setting the bag down on the rickety table by the window. Miles revealed what he was hiding, a plastic-wrapped, slightly dented bottle of champagne he must have picked up from a gas station nearby. "We figured if the family won't celebrate you, we will," he said. I chuckled, shaking my head. "You didn't have to do all this." "We know," Tara said, pulling out 2 greasy-looking burgers and a mountain of fries. "That's why we wanted to." I watched them move around my tiny room like it was the grand ballroom of the Ritz. Tara even pulled a faded motel towel off the rack to use as a tablecloth, smoothing it over the table with a flourish. Miles popped the champagne with a loud pop. That made me flinch and sprayed a little onto the stained carpet. We all laughed, a real laugh this time, one that started low in my chest and shook itself free without permission. Tara raised her plastic cup. "To Logan Barnes, the smartest damn mechanic this side of the country." Miles chimed in, "To new beginnings, old friends, and the burgers that got us through the worst nights." I lifted my cup too. "And to the people who show up, no matter what." We clinked the cups together, and for a moment, the cheap champagne tasted sweeter than any vintage wine ever could. We ate and talked long into the night, sitting on the motel's creaky chairs, ignoring the musty smell and the buzzing neon sign outside. Miles told a story about the time we tried fixing up an old Dodge in high school and ended up blowing out the engine. Tara laughed so hard she nearly fell out of her chair. When they finally left, promising to meet me for breakfast in the morning, I stood at the door a while longer, watching them disappear into the parking lot. Their laughter echoed faintly as they got into their truck and drove off. I closed the door quietly behind me. For the first time since the ceremony, the silence didn't feel like a weight pressing down on my chest. It felt like space, open, wide, full of possibilities. I pulled out my phone, meaning to check the time, and instinctively opened Carla's social media page again. There she was, posted just an hour ago. Another picture with her sister Mona, this time under a string of fairy lights, wine glasses raised high. The caption read, "Sisters before misters. Movie night magic sparkles." There were likes, comments, heart emojis, but no mention of me. No hint that anything special had been missed tonight. No acknowledgement that her husband had walked across a stage today, diploma in hand, after years of working himself to the bone. I stared at the photo, my thumb hovering over the screen. I could have commented, could have sent something snide or bitter, could have pointed out what she was pretending not to see. But instead, I locked the phone and tossed it onto the bed. I wasn't going to beg for acknowledgement anymore. I wasn't going to keep chasing the scraps of affection they tossed at me when it was convenient. I turned back to my laptop, opened the story I had started earlier, and began to type again. Not about them. About me. About a man who learned that sometimes the people you think you can't live without are the very people holding you back from becoming the person you're meant to be. I wrote until my fingers ached, until my eyes blurred, until the first rays of dawn started creeping through the edges of the curtain. When I finally closed the laptop and set it down, I felt different. Not healed. Not yet. But steadier. I lay back on the stiff mattress, staring up at the ceiling, and made myself a promise. I wasn't going to waste another minute begging for people to be proud of me. I was going to build a life that didn't need their permission to be beautiful. Sleep found me sometime after that, deep and dreamless, the kind of sleep that only comes when you've finally made a decision that frees you. When I woke up hours later, the motel room still smelled like cheap food and cheap champagne, but I didn't mind. Today was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to start it on my own terms. I don't know why that morning felt so different. Maybe it was the way the sunlight hit the worn-down carpet of the motel room. Or maybe it was something deeper, something that had finally snapped free inside me during the night. I sat at the little wooden table by the window, nursing a terrible cup of motel coffee, staring at my diploma laid out neatly across the table like it was a relic. My name was printed in bold letters. Logan Barnes, certified automotive technician. It wasn't a law degree. It wasn't a medical license. But to me, it was proof. Proof that every night I spent working back-to-back shifts, every holiday I missed, every time I patched a tire for $20 just to keep the lights on, it had all meant something. I ran my hand over the diploma, thinking way back. It wasn't just about yesterday's ceremony. It wasn't about a text message or even a missed plane. It was about years, a lifetime. I thought about the way Carla used to talk to me when we were younger. Before the wedding, before the mortgage, before the fights over money and missed dinners. Back then, she smiled when I fixed her old Corolla for free. She laughed at my grease-stained hands, kissed the dirt on my forehead like it was a badge of honor. But somewhere along the line, the laughter changed. Somewhere along the line, she stopped seeing my work as love and started seeing it as failure. I could still hear her voice, sharp and dismissive, every time I brought home a paycheck that barely stretched to cover groceries. "You're good with your hands, not your brain, babe," she'd say, half laughing as she flipped through designer magazines full of things we couldn't afford. "Stick to what you know." At first, I thought it was a joke. I laughed with her, brushed it off. You do that when you love someone. You forgive small cuts, you pretend they don't sting. But the small cuts added up. By the time Brianna was old enough to understand, she had. "You're not, like, smart. It was said with the casual cruelty only a teenager could master, but it hit harder than I let her see. And it wasn't just at home. Carla's family never hid what they thought about me. Mona, her sister, especially. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every barbecue at her fancy lake house, the digs were always there. "Oh, Logan, still fixing people's cars? So cute. You're like a real-life handyman Barbie doll," she'd giggle, glass of wine in hand, while the others chuckled politely. I smiled through it. I always smiled through it. I told myself it didn't matter because I was building something. For them. For us. When I enrolled in the certification program, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see me differently. Carla barely looked up from her phone when I told her. Cool, she said flatly. Hope you pass. I told Brianna over breakfast one morning, excited, hoping for some sign she was proud of me. She barely mumbled a response, too busy texting her friends about some party. Every step I climbed alone. And yesterday had been the final proof. I stirred the terrible coffee absent-mindedly, the spoon clinking against the mug. My reflection stared back at me from the window, tired eyes, messy hair, the same old Logan. But not really. Not anymore. I realized something important as I sat there, listening to the cars rush by outside the motel. It wasn't just that they didn't respect me. It was that they never would. No matter how hard I worked. No matter how many paychecks I brought home. No matter how many dreams I built with my bare hands. To them, I would always be the man in the grease-stained cap. The handyman. The guy who wasn't smart. The one good enough to fix their broken stuff, but never good enough to be proud of. I leaned back in the chair, staring up at the cracked ceiling. Maybe the problem wasn't that they didn't see me. Maybe the problem was that I kept waiting for them to. The coffee had gone cold, but I took a sip anyway, letting the bitterness roll over my tongue. It woke me up more than the heat ever could. I pulled my laptop closer and opened a new document. At the top, I typed 4 words. A lifetime of silence. Then I started writing. Not about them this time. About me. About the quiet boy who learned early to fix things because he couldn't fix the way people looked at him. About the teenager who worked 2 jobs just to afford a used truck while other kids got brand new cars from their parents. About the man who built a life out of scraps and sweat and kept thinking foolishly, stubbornly, that someday, someone would clap for him. I wrote until the words blurred together. Every memory came rushing back. The Christmas Carla said, maybe if you made more money, we could afford a real vacation. The night Brianna came home crying about college applications and snapped at me. You wouldn't understand, Dad. You didn't even go to a real school. The way Mona once introduced me at a party. This is Logan. He's good with cars, bad with ambition. They thought they were better. But the truth was, I had worked harder than all of them combined. I built our life from dirt and dreams, and they treated me like I was the dirt part. Not anymore. The knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. It was Miles, of course, grinning with 2 steaming cups of diner coffee. Tara stood behind him, holding a box of donuts like it was a peace offering. Thought you might want real coffee, Miles said, handing me a cup. I grinned and took it. You guys are lifesavers. Tara pushed past me into the room, setting the donuts down and surveying the place with a wrinkled nose. We're staging an intervention, she announced. Step 1, no more sad motel rooms. Step 2, Miles added, flopping onto the bed like a teenager, you're coming with us to look at apartments. I stared at them, warmth filling the cracks that had split wide open inside me over the past few days. Real family shows up. Real family doesn't need to be begged. I took a long sip of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me, feeling something inside me, something heavy and tired, start to lift. Okay, I said finally. Let's find me a new home. Miles hooped and Tara threw a donut at my head. I ducked, laughing for the first time that morning. Outside, the sun rose higher, bright and unapologetic. And for the first time in years, I rose with it. Late nights became my new habit. Not because I couldn't sleep, though sometimes that was true, but because those quiet hours felt like the only time I could breathe. When the world went still, I could hear my own thoughts clearly for once, without Carla's voice in the background picking them apart, without Brianna's sighs or eye rolls dragging me down. I wasn't wasting those hours anymore. I spent them building. Quietly. Carefully. At first, it started with paperwork. I pulled out dusty old folders from the back of the closet, papers I hadn't thought about in years. Receipts. Bank statements. Old emails printed out and shoved in drawers. At first, it felt like picking at an old wound. But after a while, it started to feel more like armor. Piece by piece, I reminded myself how much I had given. I sat at that little wobbly motel desk, scanning in receipts from years back. The money I poured into Carla's dream boutique when no one else would loan her a dime. Every extra shift I took. Every missed meal. Every time I went without so she could buy mannequins, fancy shopping bags, overpriced shelving units she said were essential for the look. I found the old paperwork where I had co-signed Brianna's student loans too. I remembered that day perfectly, her excitement, her hug, her quick, "Thanks, Dad," before she ran off with friends to celebrate. No one ever asked if I could afford it. No one cared about the risk I took tying my credit to hers. It was just expected, because that's what dads do, right? Sacrifice and smile. Except no one ever said thank you again. I wasn't collecting these things out of spite. I wasn't planning some grand act of revenge. Not yet. I just needed to see it all laid out in front of me. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the years of giving, the years of showing up when no one else did. By the end of the first week, I had built a file, a thick one, full of proof, full of memories, full of reminders of who I was when no one else was looking. Miles caught me one evening, hunched over a pile of papers in my new tiny apartment. The one they helped me find in a quiet neighborhood, above a small bakery that always smelled like heaven. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You building a case or building a future?" he asked, half joking but not really. I looked up at him, rubbing my eyes. "Both," I said simply. He nodded, like he understood without needing the messy details. He always did. Some nights, when my eyes got too heavy to keep sorting through paperwork, I switched to planning. I made lists. Quiet ones. Private ones. Things I would need to untangle myself fully from Carla's web. I started researching how to legally remove my name from Brianna's loans, something that wouldn't be easy, but wasn't impossible if I could show I had been misled or that my circumstances had changed drastically. I looked into the boutique's business structure, something I had helped set up years ago when Carla insisted it would be our future. Turns out, I was listed quietly as a silent partner. My signature was still on the funding documents. I still had a say I had never used until now. I learned about financial separation, how to protect my assets, how to protect myself. And all the while, I smiled at work. I smiled at the bakery owner downstairs. I smiled when Miles and Tara dragged me out for cheap tacos on Friday nights. I wasn't angry anymore. I was preparing. Because now, I wasn't just trying to survive. I was getting ready to live. One evening, after a long shift at the garage where I had started working, I sat on my little balcony with a beer, looking out over the city lights. My hands were black with grease, my shirt smelled like exhaust, and there was a rip in the knee of my jeans. But I had never felt cleaner. I thought back to the night of the graduation, to standing there in that cold, echoing hall, looking for faces that never came. I realized something that chilled me and freed me at the same time. I had been auditioning for their approval my whole life. Every repaired dishwasher, every birthday party paid for in overtime hours, every late-night gas run when Carla just had to have ice cream. All of it had been me trying to prove I was enough. And they had already decided I wasn't. No matter how much I gave, no matter how many times I showed up, they had built a version of me in their heads that I could never escape. The handyman. The simpleton. The backup plan that could mock when it suited them. I took a long pull from the beer, savoring the taste of it. I wasn't angry about it anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just wasn't going to play anymore. The next morning, I started moving in silence. I drafted letters. Not dramatic ones. Clean, legal ones. Notarized my intent to withdraw from the boutique's financial structure. Sent it certified mail so Carla couldn't pretend she never saw it. I contacted the loan office handling Brianna's student account. Started the process of removing my co-signature by citing financial instability. After all, the separation paperwork I filed would back me up if anyone questioned it. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't announcing anything. I was just pulling my energy back, piece by piece, from the places it had been wasted. Every step felt lighter. Like shrugging off a heavy coat you didn't realize you were wearing until it hit the ground. Miles laughed when I told him what I was doing over coffee one Saturday morning. "About damn time," he said, clinking his mug against mine. "You're finally getting out of their maze, man." I smiled, really smiled, feeling it all the way to my bones. I didn't need them to see me. I didn't need them to clap. I was finally learning how to clap for myself. And as I filed away the last pieces of paperwork that night, locking the file cabinet with a satisfying click, I felt it. Not anger. Not revenge. Freedom. The morning I moved out, the house was strangely quiet. No music blaring from Brianna's room. No Carla clattering around the kitchen, barking orders about laundry or groceries. It felt like the house was holding its breath, like even the walls knew something was about to happen. I stood in the living room for a long time, just looking around. The framed family photos on the shelves, the throw pillows Carla insisted on buying because they were chic, the faint smell of her expensive candles. I used to think this was home, but now it just felt like a place I had been renting space in, paying in cash, time, and dignity. I had packed everything important the night before, only what I needed, nothing more. A few clothes, my tools, my diploma, my laptop. There was a letter sitting on the kitchen table, neatly folded, sealed in an envelope with Carla's name written across the front in plain block letters. It wasn't a long letter. It wasn't cruel. It simply said, "I am moving out. I am withdrawing my financial support from the boutique. I am withdrawing my name from Brianna's loan agreement. I wish you both well. Please do not contact me for money or assistance moving forward." Simple, clean, final. I set the house keys beside the letter. No dramatic note. No shouting match. No grand goodbye speech. Just quiet closure. I slipped out the door, locking it behind me one last time. Miles was waiting out front in his truck, the bed loaded up with my few boxes. He didn't say anything when I climbed in. He just nodded once and pulled out of the driveway without looking back. Neither did I. At the lawyer's office downtown, I signed the separation papers I had spent the last few weeks preparing. Carla hadn't even responded when the notice was served. Ignored it, probably thought I was bluffing. She would find out soon enough that I wasn't. The boutique's investors found out first. The moment my withdrawal became official, I sent copies of financial records to the two largest silent partners backing Carla's boutique. Records she had begged me to help organize once upon a time, back when she still thought I was useful. Receipts showing personal expenses being mixed with business ones. Sketchy deposits. Red flags all over the place. It didn't take long. Within 3 days, I got an email from one of the investors' lawyers, thanking me for bringing the discrepancies to light. A few polite lines at the bottom hinted at pending legal action against Carla. Meanwhile, I contacted the student loan office handling Brianna's tuition. I filed the paperwork to revoke my cosigner status, citing separation of assets and financial hardship. It wasn't an easy process, but I had come prepared. Legal separation documents. Pay stubs from my new, smaller salary after moving out. A formal statement outlining the broken family support structure. It would trigger a full review of Brianna's account. Without a cosigner, her loan balance would be considered delinquent. Her college would be notified. Deadlines would be set. Without warning, their carefully built tower, the boutique dreams, the college plans, the safe little world where I was expected to keep paying while they laughed at me behind closed doors, was starting to tilt. I didn't gloat. I didn't brag. I just kept moving forward. Miles and Tara helped me set up the small apartment over the bakery. It wasn't much, 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen that barely fit a table and 2 chairs, but it felt more like home than the house ever did. We strung up a few photos, real ones. Pictures of me and Miles from high school, greasy and grinning with a busted old Dodge between us. Tara laughing with a burger in one hand and a beer in the other. A framed shot of me at the graduation ceremony, diploma in hand, smiling like a man who finally believed he was worth something. I found work easily. The owner of a respected auto shop in town, Mr. Jennings, had been at the graduation. He remembered my name. Remembered the speech I gave about work ethic and second chances. When I showed up in his office with my certificate and a willingness to start anywhere, even sweeping floors, he grinned and said, "Start Monday. We need men like you." Every day after that, I went to work early and stayed late. I learned every inch of that shop. I learned from the younger techs and the old-timers alike. I didn't act like I knew everything just because I had a diploma now. I earned my spot the way I always had, by showing up. I started saving every penny I could. At night, I kept writing. Not stories of anger or betrayal anymore. Stories of rebuilding. Stories about men who learned the hard way but didn't stay broken. Some nights, Miles would come by with beers, or Tara would drag me out to trivia night at the little bar down the street. I laughed more. I ate better. I slept like a man who didn't have to walk on eggshells anymore. Every so often, I'd get a text from Carla. "We need to talk. This isn't funny, Logan. You can't just walk away from us." I didn't answer. And then came Brianna's frantic email from her college account. "Dad, they're saying my tuition's overdue. They're saying I might get suspended. What's happening? Please fix this." She didn't call me Dad much anymore. Only when she wanted something. I stared at the screen a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I closed the laptop. Not out of anger. Out of peace. Because I finally understood that fixing everything for everyone had never made them love me more. It only made them take more. The real fixing, the kind that mattered, was what I was doing now. Fixing my life. Fixing my heart. Fixing my future. One deliberate step at a time. I didn't have to go looking for the fallout. It found me all on its own. At first, it was quiet. Just a few uneasy days where the text messages slowed, then stopped. No calls. No demands. No guilt trips. I kept my head down at work, taking extra shifts, learning everything Mr. Jennings was willing to teach me. The days passed in a blur of oil changes, tire rotations, transmission repairs. Honest work. Satisfying work. But the cracks in their world had started, and I didn't need front row seats to know it. One afternoon, about a month after I left, Miles walked into the garage waving his phone like it was on fire. "Man, you need to see this," he said, pulling me aside near the break room door. He showed me a picture from a local Facebook group, the boutique, Carla's Pride and Joy, papered up with foreclosure signs. Red letters screaming notice of default across the windows. I stared at it for a long time, feeling nothing at first. Just a strange, distant sense of watching something you knew was coming finally arrive. Like the first raindrop before a storm. Miles tucked the phone away, studying my face. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I am." And I was. Because I hadn't torn her boutique apart. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I had just stepped away. And without my steady hands behind the scenes, without my late-night accounting, my hidden overtime money, my quiet forgiveness when she skimmed from the wrong accounts, the whole thing crumbled on its own. A few days later, Tara overheard more news at her job downtown. Apparently, Mona had tried to organize a family rescue plan for Carla, talking big about fundraising, investment drives, reaching out to important people to save her sister's reputation. But the truth was simple. Nobody wanted to touch it. Investors hated bad publicity. Suppliers hated unpaid invoices. Even family hated sinking with a ship that was already underwater. And Carla? She was scrambling. Hard. I heard about her trying to rebrand online, launching a GoFundMe with a tearful video about unforeseen betrayal and loyalty lost. I didn't watch it. Miles showed me a screenshot. Carla, eyes red, makeup running, but I refused to hit play. I didn't need to hear the words to know what she would say. I was the villain now. That was fine. I wasn't interested in defending myself anymore. I had finally learned you can't explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Meanwhile, Brianna's situation started to unravel too. I got another email from the student loan office, confirming that after my name was removed, Brianna's remaining balance had become immediately due. Without a co-signer, the loan was reclassified. Payment deadlines. Financial aid suspension. Academic probation. I didn't smile when I read the notice. But I didn't cry either. There was a time I would have bent over backward to protect her from the consequences of her own choices. Not anymore. Choices have weight. And it was time she learned that too. One Saturday evening, as the sun dipped low and the streets outside buzzed with weekend traffic, I sat out on my little balcony, polishing up a customer's carburetor I had promised to finish. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Unknown number. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but something told me to answer. I wiped my hands on a rag and picked up. "Hello." There was a moment of silence on the line, just breathing. Then a voice, tight, furious, barely holding back tears. "You ruined everything," Carla hissed. "You selfish, bitter." I hung up without saying a word. Not out of anger. Out of peace. The old Logan, the one who would have stood there taking every angry word, explaining himself, begging to be seen, try. A few minutes later, a message came through. It was Brianna this time. "Please, Dad. I can't afford to stay in school. I'll lose everything. Please fix this." There was no, "I'm sorry." No, "I was wrong." No, "I should have been there for you." Just fix it. Like always. I set the phone down and didn't reply. Instead, I picked up my wrench and kept working, the simple, steady rhythm of tightening bolts drowning out the noise of the past. Days turned into weeks. Mr. Jennings promoted me to lead technician faster than I could have hoped. Apparently, my work ethic hadn't gone unnoticed. I started training the newer guys, running diagnostics, handling bigger, more complicated jobs. I loved it. Loved the grease under my nails, the way a broken machine came roaring back to life under my hands. It was messy, tiring, honest work, and it was mine. Meanwhile, Carla's life kept slipping through her fingers. The boutique folded officially. Bankruptcy filings. Lawsuits from unpaid vendors. Ugly online reviews. Brianna was suspended from college, pending repayment of her overdue balance. Mona stopped posting glamorous family pictures. The life they had built, the one that had no room for a man like me, was showing cracks so big even strangers could see them. I didn't dance on the ruins. I didn't call to say, "I told you so." I didn't need to. The truth stood taller and louder than any speech I could have given. And the best part? I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Every day, as I wiped the sweat from my brow and locked up the garage for the night, I felt it stronger. I hadn't just escaped a bad marriage. I had escaped the small, bitter version of myself that believed I had to earn love through sacrifice. I had learned to show up for myself the way I used to show up for everyone else. And as the summer deepened into crisp fall nights, I started dreaming bigger than I had in years. Dreaming about a shop of my own. A little place with my name on it. A place where I didn't have to be anything other than exactly who I was. Logan Barnes. Mechanic. Dreamer. Builder. Man who finally chose himself. It happened on a Wednesday evening, just as the sun dipped low and the city lights started flickering to life. I had just finished another long shift at the garage, my hands sore but my heart lighter than it had been in years. I was wiping down my tool cart, lost in the quiet rhythm of the work, when I heard the knock. At first, I thought it was just the bakery owner downstairs dropping off leftover pastries like she sometimes did. I smiled to myself, already imagining a slice of apple pie. But when I opened the door, it wasn't the bakery lady. It was Carla. And behind her, standing awkwardly, red-eyed and sniffling, was Brianna. They looked nothing like the polished, confident people I used to know. Carla's hair was frizzed at the ends, her makeup smudged like she hadn't slept. Brianna's once pristine college sweatshirt was wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. For a long moment, none of us said anything. Then Carla pushed past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Brianna followed, hesitating only for a second before stepping inside. I closed the door softly behind them, not because I was letting them back in, but because I wanted this to end without a scene. Carla turned to me, arms crossed tight across her chest. "You have to fix this," she said, voice trembling but sharp. "You can't just abandon your family." Brianna, wiping at her nose with her sleeve, added between sobs, "Dad, please. I can't graduate if you don't help me. I'll lose everything. Please." I leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching them. I didn't yell. I didn't slam things. I just listened. Because for the first time, I realized how little they actually saw me, not even now, standing in front of them, with everything broken around them. To them, I was still just the fixer. The ATM. The background noise. Not a man. Not a person with limits. Just a tool they were upset had stopped working. Carla took a step closer, her eyes blazing. "You're still our family," she snapped, like it was a weapon. "You owe us." I tilted my head slightly, feeling the anger rise and then settle inside me like dust. "I owe you," I repeated softly. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I cut her off. I walked slowly over to the small fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and set it on the table between us. "For the drive back," I said calmly. "You both look tired." They stared at me like I had spoken a different language. Brianna's face crumpled. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Please don't do this. I need you. I know I wasn't always nice, but I need you now." I sat down in the only chair I owned, the one by the little window that looked out over the street, and I spoke the truth I had been carrying for too long. "Family," I said slowly, "doesn't abandon each other for movie nights." Carla's mouth snapped shut. "Family doesn't laugh at you when you're working 2 jobs to pay their bills," I continued. "Family doesn't call you a disappointment behind your back while you're out there breaking your body to keep a roof over their heads." Neither of them said anything. The silence was heavier than anything they could have thrown at me. "You didn't just miss a ceremony," I said. "You missed the years leading up to it. You missed every moment I needed you. You missed every sign that I was drowning." Brianna hiccuped a sob, and Carla's face twisted like she was about to argue, but she didn't. Maybe for once, even she knew there were no words good enough to cover the truth. I stood up, walked over to the door, and opened it. The cool evening air rushed in, crisp and sharp. "You made your choices," I said quietly. "Now you live with them." Carla glared at me, her lip curling. "You think you're better than us now?" I met her gaze evenly. "No," I said. "I just finally know my worth." Brianna stumbled past me first, sobbing into her sleeves. Carla hesitated for a second longer, like she might say something else. But whatever it was, she swallowed it back. She walked out without another word. I closed the door gently behind them and locked it. Not because I was afraid they'd come back, because it was time. I stood there for a while, breathing in the silence, feeling it settle around me like a warm blanket. This wasn't anger anymore. It was peace. I had always thought forgiveness was something you had to hand out like candy, something you gave even to the people who didn't deserve it, because it was the right thing to do. But now I understood forgiveness a little differently. Sometimes, forgiveness wasn't about fixing a relationship. Sometimes, it was about finally letting go of the hope that the people who hurt you would ever say they were sorry. Sometimes, forgiveness was closing the door, turning the key, and choosing your own peace over their chaos. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlights blinked on one by one, little beacons in the growing dark. I sipped my water slowly, watching them, and I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, not because the pain was magically gone, but because I knew, deep in my bones, that I had survived. And better yet, I was just getting started. The days after that night felt different. Lighter somehow, like I had been carrying a weight I didn't even realize until it finally slid off my shoulders. I kept working at the shop, kept saving my money, kept minding my own business. No drama, no fights, no chasing anyone who had long ago decided to walk away. Miles and Tara showed up often, just like they always did. We started a little tradition, Friday night burgers at the old diner downtown. Greasy food, bad coffee, and laughter so loud it made the waitress roll her eyes at us. They weren't just friends anymore. They were family, real family. The kind that showed up without needing a reason. The kind that didn't see you as a backup plan or a punching bag. One evening, a few months after Carla and Brianna came to my door, I found myself standing outside a rundown little auto shop on the edge of town. The for lease sign had been up for a while, the building forgotten, gathering dust and graffiti. But I saw something different. I saw potential. I saw a future I could build with my own two hands. I called the number on the sign and arranged a meeting with the owner the next morning. It wasn't perfect. The roof leaked. The office smelled like old coffee and mildew. The garage doors groaned when they opened. But it was cheap, manageable, and most importantly, it would be mine. By the following week, the lease papers were signed. Keys jingled in my pocket as I stood in the middle of the empty garage, the sunlight spilling through the cracks like promises. I was finally standing inside a dream I thought I would never have the right to chase. And I wasn't alone. Miles showed up the first Saturday with 2 toolboxes and a case of beer. Tara brought sandwiches and folding chairs. We scrubbed the floors, patched the leaks, painted the walls. We laughed when the paint rollers kept falling apart, swore when the lights shorted out twice in a row, cheered when the new sign finally arrived. A simple, clean metal rectangle that read, Barnes Auto Repair. No frills, no fancy slogans, just the truth. Barnes. Me. I cried a little when the sign went up. No one said anything. Tara just squeezed my shoulder and handed me another sandwich. The first few weeks were slow. A few oil changes. A brake job here and there. Mostly friends of friends who wanted to support me. But word spread. People liked good work done by honest hands. And I had nothing left to prove except the quality of my work. One afternoon, while I was fixing a radiator leak, Tara pulled up with a small box in her hands. Got something for you, she said, grinning. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened it. Inside was a keychain, simple, silver, smooth to the touch. On it were the words, "Family isn't blood. It's loyalty." I ran my thumb over the engraving, my throat tightening. I looked at her, at Miles leaning against the truck with his arms folded, grinning like an idiot. And I realized this was what real love looked like. Not words shouted across the kitchen table in anger. Not hollow promises made when it was convenient. Not loyalty demanded only when it served someone else. This was love given freely. No strings. No debts. Just love. I hooked the keychain onto my shop keys and held it up proudly. "Best damn gift I ever got," I said, my voice rough. Tara teared up and shoved a sandwich into my hand to cover it. That night, I sat on the back steps of the garage, looking out over the parking lot that was still half empty but full of dreams anyway. And I thought about all the years I spent chasing people who never saw me. All the times I twisted myself into not trying to be enough. All the ways I made myself small so they could feel big. No more. I had found my real family. And I had found myself. Not in their approval. Not in their forgiveness. But in my own hard work. In my own belief that I was enough exactly as I was. Miles and Tara stayed late that night, helping me map out ideas for a small waiting room. Maybe even a coffee machine, Tara joked. Maybe a little shelf with free air fresheners shaped like pine trees. Simple dreams. Good dreams. Dreams built not for show, but for real life. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I was proud. And for the first time, that was enough. Later, as we sat on the curb sharing cheap pizza straight from the box, Miles raised his beer. To Logan Barnes, he said. To doing it your way. Tara lifted her bottle too. To real family, she added, smiling wide. I lifted mine. To loyalty, I said quietly. We clinked bottles under the stars, the city buzzing faintly around us. No fairy lights. No fancy parties. No speeches. Just three people who chose each other. And I realized then that this messy, greasy, beautiful life was the life I was meant to live. No begging. No pretending. Just building something real, one bolt, one laugh, one moment at a time. The grand opening wasn't grand in the way most people think. There were no red carpets, no speeches from local officials, no banners stretched across the sky. There was a small fold-out table from the bakery downstairs, covered in plastic cups of lemonade and a few trays of homemade cookies. Tara had insisted on that part. There were mismatched folding chairs scattered around the lot. A few balloons tied to the rusty fence, flapping wildly in the wind like they were just as excited as we were. And there were people. More people than I ever imagined would show up. Old classmates from the mechanic program. Customers from Mr. Jennings' shop who had heard I was striking out on my own. Parents from the neighborhood who needed a trustworthy place for oil changes. Even the bakery lady closed her shop for an hour to come up the stairs, a box of pastries in her arms and a giant grin on her face. I stood near the front door, wearing a clean shop shirt with my name stitched over the pocket, Logan, watching it all happen like it wasn't real. Miles came up beside me, clapping me on the back so hard I almost spilled my lemonade. Look at this, he said, grinning. Your own little empire. I laughed, shaking my head. Feels more like a lemonade stand. He shrugged. All empires start somewhere. Tara dragged me to the middle of the lot after that, making me stand under the new sign. She snapped picture after picture while people clapped and cheered. No Carla. No Brianna. No Mona. Just the people who mattered. I didn't think about who wasn't there. I didn't wonder what they were doing or if they even knew about today. It didn't matter anymore. They had missed my graduation because they couldn't see the man I was becoming. Now they would never be part of the life I was building. And for the first time, that thought didn't sting. It felt right. Later that afternoon, when the cookies were mostly gone and the sun was starting to slip low in the sky, I stood behind the counter, wiping it down even though it was already spotless. Miles leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching me with a small smile. You know what your problem is? He said. I raised an eyebrow. What's that? You still don't see it. See what? He straightened up, tossing a crumpled napkin into the trash can from across the room. It missed, but he didn't seem to care. You're the guy everyone roots for now, Logan. You're the one people believe in. I didn't know what to say to that. I had spent so long feeling like a disappointment that even standing here, in my own shop, with my own name on the door, it still felt fragile sometimes. Like it could all be taken away if I blinked too hard. But the truth was, it couldn't. Because no one had given me this life. No one had handed it to me. I had built it. With greasy hands and late nights and a heart that refused to stay broken. This was mine. And no one could take it. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I locked up the garage for the first time as a real business owner. The click of the lock echoed in the quiet street, and for a moment, I just stood there, holding the keys in my hand. The air was cool. The sky was scattered with stars, the moon sharp and silver above me. I pocketed the keys and walked slowly across the empty lot to my truck. I didn't rush. There was no one waiting for me at home, no one calling to demand I pick up groceries or fix another broken thing. Just me. Just peace. I opened the truck door and slid inside, sitting for a moment with the windows rolled down, breathing in the night. I thought about that man standing outside the graduation hall all those months ago, checking his phone, heart pounding with hope. I thought about the way I had smiled through the pain, through the disappointment, pretending it didn't hurt. And I wished I could reach back through time and put a hand on his shoulder. Tell him, hold on. It gets better. You get better. Because it was true. I didn't just survive them. I outgrew them. I built a life they couldn't even imagine, a life rooted in loyalty and laughter and honest work. A life where love wasn't something I had to earn like a paycheck. It was given freely, like a sandwich passed across a table, like a toolbox offered without asking, like a keychain engraved with loyalty instead of bloodlines. I smiled to myself, turned the ignition, and pulled out onto the street. The city stretched out before me, wide and open, full of possibilities. I didn't know where every road would lead. Didn't have a 5-year plan carved into stone. All I knew was that I wasn't driving back toward the life I left behind. I was moving forward, toward a future I had built with my own 2 hands, toward a home that wasn't made of bricks and resentment, but of hard work and earned joy, toward a version of myself that didn't beg for seats at tables where he was only ever going to be laughed at. I drove with the windows down, the night air rushing in, carrying away the last dust of sadness. Barnes Auto Repair. A tiny shop under the stars. A man who finally knew his own worth. That was enough. It was more than enough. And it was only the beginning.